Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Goff and I have created a math station called Create a Shape. It is at a 3rd grade level and it is geometry. It is a reteach and to reinforce for the students as we've learned about geometry in the 3rd grade. We are going to build on that with doing some hands-on learning. I first started with the students were to create just a simple shape as in the cards I have focused here, and then they would expand on that to make a 2D or 3D shape. Now for some of my other students that had trouble with this, then they could expand by making several of the simple shapes at first, and then we would work on creating the 2D to 3D dimensional shapes. The shapes are created with marshmallows and spaghetti. When I first started the project, I tried toothpicks. Well, as you know, you need to break those in half to fit a little better in some parts of shapes. So I got to thinking and I thought spaghetti. And also that goes a lot longer for classes that are bigger, whereas the class I have has 24 students. So you figure if you're on an octagon, then you would need a lot of toothpicks. So I just decided spaghetti. They can break those into certain pieces. I did require, though, that the shape be the size of this paper plate, as in the roundness. I didn't want them to create a real mini shape. And so here on mine I made, this was my example to my students, how each corner met on the outside of the circle. Then we talked about how you build up to build this, to make your 3D to 2D shape. The idea was for students to think critically, but also to expand their creativity. They could create other shapes with this, or they could build with different ones. And you could also buy the bigger marshmallows for let the students build bigger towers. And then what was expected was the students were to recognize how many sides, how many edges there were, and how many vertices. That way then the students could be prepared and also take their prior knowledge of what we've known about shapes to build and create their own shape. Along with my math station, I had found that after evaluating several classrooms, when you do a hands-on learning station, that the students sometimes forget directions or what the purpose is. So setting up my station, I have this classroom, I call it a billboard. It's kind of like you're advertising your station and you want it to be interesting for the kids. So on mine I have my titles, Create a Shape. And all I did was take a poster board and fold it into halves, like one each side, a trifold really. And then on that I put my station topic, which was to identifying and describing 2D shapes or your regular simple shapes. And then I listed the objective, so my students knew the objective that I was looking for and what they would be graded on. The materials, I listed the materials, so then my students would know that to make sure they had all their materials as they started, and I didn't have a lot of the commotion in the classroom as they were getting up and trying to find stuff or raising their hand asking, oh, what was I supposed to do, or what materials did you want me to have again? They're listed for my students to look at and refer to. Then I have the step-by-step pictures here in the middle, just kind of an example for my students to follow. It was as of another student creating different shapes. Then I put the instructions. So then I still have I have a classroom that flows very nice by not having my students standing up wanting to know different types of questions. And then at the end of the project, my students were to fill out their tell me about your shape. It's their shape, they draw it, they tell how many sides, how many vertices. Then they're going to self-assess themselves. Then at the end, how I would self-assess my students is in their math journals they had to write 4 out of the 5 correct statements about their their shape. And then I had a rubric that would follow that I used so that I made sure my students could be graded properly. And then we went back over those, and the students could share their creations with their classrooms. This is just a fun way to get hands-on and for students to learn about geometry and to expand their knowledge and recognize how shapes are built. Because when we get into real life, sometimes we don't stop and think about how many different items are created by shapes or lines or sides or vertices. So it's very important that we can expand that knowledge into our everyday learning.